This is Free Talk Live, the live Saturday edition. You can take control and bring up whatever you want, toll-free at 800-259-9231, though we are in guest mode at the moment. Let's bring back Robert Menard from thinkfree.ca. Now, Robert, you had, essentially you and, I guess, do we call her your wife, your girlfriend at the time?
I guess I would say girlfriend. I mean, wife would kind of imply a permanency, and I was pretty much aware that I was going to be asked to let go right off. So yeah.
So you essentially the Canadian equivalent of the Department of Children and Families got on your case about your daughter that was, or her daughter that was born, and they called her an unfit mother. You went through this process as a result, trying to understand the laws up there and do your best to, I guess, come to her defense and come to their aid. And in that process, you learned some pretty powerful truths, as I understand it, at least from reading what you've got on your website. Could you kind of just run through some of the most important things you came across in your quest for knowledge?
Sure. But I would first ask that you realize that the way I came about it was because I was put in a position where I looked in my own heart. I was forced to look in my heart and see what was right. And then I looked at their actions, and I saw that's totally wrong. And yet when you look at their words, apparently they're justified. So I was in a position where I either had to say my heart is right, their words are wrong, let's figure this out, or I had to abandon what was in my heart, and I couldn't do that. So I sat down with their act, the words that they used, and I figured this is a new language. I don't even know it. I'm going to start off like I don't even know what language this is.
And you're talking about, when you say new language, you mean legalese?
Yeah, legalese or law or whatever. I just treated it like an entirely new language. I had Black's Law Dictionary on one side, Bouvier's on the other, a very old English dictionary from the late 1800s, and I looked up every single word, and I was, 3 days, I was trying to focus so much on that, maybe even insane at that time. But I wanted to figure out what the heck they were doing. How could they justify this? I knew it was wrong. And then after about 3 days, I saw what was happening, and it just clicked. It immediately became apparent. Have you ever seen these laser pictures? You look past it. You look past
the magic eye things. I can never get them to work, but I understand the concept.
You got to look past it. You can't look at it. You have to realize, and what really brought me to, I guess, my position, my outlook, was that I did not accept what they were saying as truth. I accepted what was in my heart as truth, and that was the light I brought to bear. And what I found was this: they do not remove human children whatsoever. They remove the legal entity. Essentially, this is what they get you to do. When you register your child, you are creating a legal entity or a person at that time. You're associating this person with your offspring. You're the only one who can do that. The government can't.
Slow down a second. You're using a word, person, that apparently doesn't mean the same thing in our world as it does in the legal world. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest ones, because one of the things that clicked with me when I was looking through their act was they defined the word child. Who doesn't know what a child is? Why do they have to define it? And then they define person. I looked up person. In Black's Law Dictionary, you will find in section, or you have to go back to an older one. Look at the 4th edition. It states that a human being is not a person because he is a human being, but because rights and duties have been ascribed to him. Specifically, the person is that legal subject or substance of which the rights and duties are attributes. But not all human beings are persons, as was the case in Old England when there were slaves. And I'm pretty sure that's word for word.
Okay.
You're not a person. You have a person. If you look at your coat, think of your coat as your person. That's all the government can act upon. They come and they can grab your coat. Why? Because they have title to it, and you have maintained an association to it. They never, ever grab the human being. They always act through that person.
What about the guys in prison? I mean, I would say that they're a little more than their coats are locked up.
Well, again, they have maintained association with it. And one of the people, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because we're trying to uncover and unravel this entire system so that we can all have more spiritual freedom.
Right.
And yet there are still people out there who, they need the diapers. They aren't ready for this.
Sure, and it is tricky. I mean, it was designed to be tricky by a bunch of tricky lawyers, basically.
Yes, but there's a maximum law a maximum law that's states, let he who would be deceived be deceived. Every power, I found that every power they have over us is a result of us putting our signature on documents which will have the words application, submission, or registration right up at the top.
Now, this I found fascinating, and I'd heard similar things before, but you really probably made it as clear as I'd ever heard it explained. These are things that we see frequently here in America when you go and you register your car, or you apply for a driver's license, or, again, registration, application, submission. What are the meanings of those words that most people don't realize?
Before we look at those, I would like to point out the meaning of the word must. They will tell you, you must apply, you must register, and they want you to think that you have an obligation to engage in a certain action. If you had an obligation, they would use the word obliged. The word must is very tricky. It has two senses. One is an active, one is a passive. If I tell you, you must come to my party through the front door, am I creating an obligation upon you to attend my party?
No.
Or am I defining the steps that if you choose to voluntarily take them will grant me authority over you? That's their word must. It creates no obligation. It defines the parameters that will give them authority. And they got everyone thinking that that's an obligation on our part, and then they get to point to it and say, well, you entered into it voluntarily.
Right. Now I want to get to those other words in a moment here, but let's just reset for a second. Here in America, this makes sense. What you're saying makes perfect sense in that we've all basically sort of volunteered into this legal system, this society, and essentially, they claim that government only gains its powers from the consent of the governed. So therefore, the way it's supposed to work is that the people are over top of the government, and they created this government to do certain specific things, but things have sort of shifted to where the government, the people running the government, have created all these rules and regulations and forms and applications and everything to make people think that the government is above them, when in fact that's still not the case.
Well, it actually, to be honest, I really can only speak about what I know up in B.C., but I do see how there's similarities. They are actually only claiming power over their agents. They have tricked, up here we have a social insurance number. Based on my research, I'm pretty sure that social insurance number is just like your social security number, and it identifies you as a government agent or employee. Because of this, the rules, like anything with the word act in it, those do apply to government employees. So what I see is that we're supposed to have a house party here. It's supposed to be peace and abundance.
It's a neat analogy, and I want you to hang on to it. We'll bring you back, and you can explain that. Also, applications, registrations, submissions. I'm sure we've all filled out some of these forms in the past. What do the words really mean? What are the legal meanings behind them that no one who's a regular person has ever taken the time to actually look into? Well, Robert Menard did, and we'll find out more about it coming up. This is Free Talk Live. Your show, you bring up what you want. The live Saturday edition. Toll-free number is 800-259-9231, though pretty much you'll need to restrict your calls for questions for Robert Menard from thinkfree.ca until hour number 2, and then we'll open it up to anything. All right, let's go back to Robert Menard from thinkfree.ca. Some tragic things happened in regards to the government trying to meddle around in his life. As a result, he took the time to sort of dig into all of the legalese behind the laws up there in Canada. Turns out there's a lot of similarities between laws in Canada and laws in the United States, in that they're all written by lawyers. And he discovered some things that most people don't ever become aware of, and that is some of the actual legal meanings of some terms that you might think you knew what they meant. In fact, Robert, you'd said that the word must, when used in a legal terminology, doesn't really mean what you might think it means. It, in fact, means may.
Yes, it doesn't create an obligation. It defines the path, which, if you voluntarily take it, will transfer authority to another. But just to let you know, Ian, part of the problem starts when, no offense, but you're referring to laws. I don't refer to them as laws. I've distinguished between those things which are laws and those things which are merely statutes. And it's really a path of learning to distinguish between one thing and the other. So to find this path, you've got to distinguish between a law and a statute.
Got it. Are you outdoors right now? I'm getting some wind on your line.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Well, it's best if you can get out of the wind, but it's all right. So you were going to mention the house party analogy, which I found pretty interesting. What is that?